In America, everyone counts, and the 2020 census is how that great promise is kept. Respond today online, by phone, or by mail, and help inform hundreds of billions in funding for education, health programs, and more. Shape your future. Start at 2020census.gov. Let's talk about what's happening out in California. Just massive fires taking place all across the West Coast, not just in California, but also what is happening in the state of Washington and others. 35 people have died. Homes been, whole neighborhoods destroyed, and the West Coast covered in smoke, folks. Democratic-led states and Donald Trump have clashed over the role of climate change ahead of his visit today to California. Check this out.
We broke a world record in the Death Valley, 130 degrees, but even in greater LA, 120 plus degrees. And we're seeing this warming trend make our summers warmer, but also our winters warmer as well. So I think one area of mutual agreement and priority is vegetation management. But I think we want to work with you to really recognize the changing climate and what it means to our forests and actually work together with that science. That science is going to be key, because if we ignore that science and sort of put our head in the sand and think it's all about vegetation management, we're not going to succeed together protecting Californians.
Okay. It'll start getting cooler. You just watch.
I wish science agreed with you.
Hey, well, I don't think science knows, actually. Tom?
The sheer stupidity, folks. California, Oregon, and Washington State, they have seen historic wildfires that have burned faster and farther than ever before. Numerous studies in recent years have linked bigger wildfires in the U.S. to global warming from the burning of coal, oil, and gas. The Trump administration has blamed poor forest management for the flames. This, folks, to understand what this looked like, this was a drone video that was shot in San Francisco last week. I swear this was that Red Sun movie that Arnold Schwarzenegger was in. Watch this. Mustafa, that wasn't doctored video. That wasn't color corrected. I mean, that was actually what it looked like. I mean, how stupid can Donald Trump be to sit there? Well, I don't think the scientists know. You damn sure don't know.
The scientists know for sure. The National Climate Assessment, the IPCC report, which are all some of the top scientists from around the world, have told us exactly what we are seeing now is what was going to happen. So Trump knows because he has that information. Trump's denial is costing people their lives. And that's the most seriousness of this conversation. When you see those orange skies in the daytime, that was a picture in the daytime. Right now on the West Coast, people have the worst air quality in our country in those cities than across the entire planet. In places like India and China and other places that really have very little enforcement happening around environmental laws and the things that are happening with climate change. So when he makes those statements, he's putting people's lives in danger. You know, when they said that he was actually going to go to California, I was thinking him visiting California is almost like a thief returning to the scene of the crime, because he knows by rolling back or weakening over 100 environmental protections, he is therefore putting more air pollution, warming up our planet, you know, causing temperatures to rise, creating more intensity in the droughts that are driving these wildfires. And they're stripping away people's homes and their wealth and their lives. And places as far away as some of the shots that were shown there, you know, the air pollution is so bad that those people who have these chronic medical conditions from exposures, now they're also more vulnerable to both getting COVID-19 and dying from COVID-19. So his denial continues to play out in this vicious circle of people losing their lives.
Robert, here's a tweet someone posted 2 days ago. I'm sorry, Joseph. Wow, I keep reading this story. Vancouver is covered with a blanket of hazy smoke from the forest fires in northern Washington state. Um, Guys, go to my iPad, please. You can actually feel the smoke in your lungs and eyes when you walk outside. And you got this idiot who's sitting there like, it's no big deal. Yeah, and then, it's gonna get cooler. I know. You just said it was 130, but it's gonna get cooler.
Look, I think when we talk about the issue of climate change, I think President Trump and many of the old hands in the Republican Party, I call it the most bombastic iteration of our greatest hits of yesterday. And so I think when we approach the issue of climate change, I approach it mostly from a generational standpoint first, more so than the partisan standpoint. I think if you look at most of the data, most self-identified conservatives under the age of 40 believe that climate change is real and we need to do something about it. And so I think the impetus for us now is that for people who care about climate change to start voting on the issue of climate change. Now, obviously, that's not going to happen in 2020, and when we're talking about all things President Trump for good reasons and for bad reasons. But I think that as we look for a pathway forward, there certainly has to be a way for us to coalesce around the fact that this should not be a partisan issue. This is a human issue, really an existential threat to humanity in and of itself. And so we have to start talking about what are the solutions that are going to allow us to arrive at the outcomes that we all know need to be done, which is a precipitous decrease in carbon emissions. What are going to be the energy sources that allow us to deal with the robust energy needs of a 21st century world, but at the same time still hitting those carbon reduction benchmarks? Is that putting a price on carbon? Are we talking about putting nuclear back on the table as the only major robust energy source that can be with zero carbon emissions and dealing with that as a frank conversation? I think all of these things are part of the tools that we need to be leveraging if we're going to have a conversation. Obviously, President Trump does not want to participate in that conversation and in many ways has impeded that conversation. But I think we have to also understand that we've been headed in the wrong direction for a long time, and administration after administration and politician after politician has ignored this issue when they've had the opportunity to act because, quite frankly, unfortunately, when it comes down to election time, this is not the issue that gets tossed around the kitchen table, but perhaps we need to change that because otherwise we'll be heading nowhere fast.
Look, you're dealing with people who are beyond idiots, Avis, and there's no other way to describe Donald Trump. They have gutted the EPA, they have gutted commerce, they've gutted these agencies. They don't give a damn about air quality. It's like whatever big business wants, and that's pretty much what you're dealing with here.
It's exactly what you're dealing with. And, when I hear him say it'll get cooler, it kind of reminds me of him saying it'll just disappear. It kind of reminds me of saying, just inject yourself with bleach. I mean, here is someone who specifically not only denies science, and I believe he knows the truth. Just like Mustafa said, I believe he knows the truth just like he knew the truth about COVID, but he has a different agenda and he doesn't care. Here's the main thing that we need to realize, you all. He does not care that over 30 people have died from this fire alone. He doesn't care how many more will die. He doesn't care how many times this will happen because he doesn't perceive people in California as people he should care about. He doesn't perceive people in Washington and Oregon either, apparently, as people he should care about. And this is the problem when you have a fact-free presidency. That's why people don't trust him. That's why people don't trust a thing out of his mouth. Because just like COVID, this literally is a life and death situation. And instead of taking it seriously and acting like an adult and actually listening to scientists, people who have studied this for decades to guide him in a direction that could save countless lives, he wants to be there and act cute, crack jokes, and once again, rely on idiocy rather than on facts. And that's something that none of us can really deal with if we want to be able to survive the real reality of climate change today and moving forward.
All right, folks, back to our Roland Mark Unfiltered video in just one moment. As our community comes together to support the fight against racial injustice, I want to take a second to talk about one thing we can do to ensure our voices are heard. Not tomorrow, but now. Have your voices heard in terms of what kind of future we want by taking the 2020 census today at 2020census.gov? Now, folks, let me help you out. The census is a count of everyone living in the country. It happens once every 10 years. It is mandated by the U.S. Constitution. The thing that's important is that the census informs funding, billions of dollars, how they are spent in our communities every single year. I grew up in Clinton Park in Houston, Texas, and we wanted new parks and roads and a senior citizen center. Well, the census helps inform all of that and where funding goes. It also determines how many seats your state will get in the U.S. House of Representatives. Young black men and young children of color are historically undercounted, which means a potential loss of funding for services that helps our community. Folks, we have the power to change that. We have the power to help determine where hundreds of billions in federal funding go each year for the next 10 years. Funding that can impact our community, our neighborhoods, and our families and friends. Folks, responses are 100% confidential and can't be shared with your landlord, law enforcement, or any government agency. So please, take the 2020 census today. Shape your future. Start at 2020census.gov.